The moment we believe we need someone to complete us is the very moment we place ourselves in the weakest position. I don't say this to make you cold, but to remind you, emotional dependence, especially in relationships with women, is quietly corroding our inner strength. There are men who were once unshakable, yet a single indifferent glance or an unanswered message can unravel their entire mind. Have you ever felt that? This video isn't about manipulation, nor is it a guide to win over any woman. It is a call to awaken. If you're weary from chasing, proving, sacrificing without return, then it's time to return to the root of your strength, self-mastery. We do not gain power by clinging, but by knowing when to let go. Not because we no longer care, but because we have chosen ourselves first, and that marks the beginning of true power. 1. Becoming still in the mind. Don't react, just act. In most human interactions, especially romantic ones, we're often driven by a chain of almost unconscious emotional reactions. When hurt, we become defensive. When rejected, we retaliate. When someone pulls away, we rush to hold on. These are not deliberate choices, but reflexes of an untrained mind. That's instinct, and instinct left unchecked enslaves us to emotion. Stoic philosophy does not reject emotion. It reminds us that only by rising above instinctual reaction can we master ourselves. The untrained man reacts instantly to every external stimulus: a cold glance from a woman, an unanswered message, an abrupt change in tone. The first reaction is insecurity. From insecurity grows the need to control. From control comes manipulation. And instead of building a relationship on respect and attraction, we sabotage it through inner chaos. Silence in this context is not avoidance or passivity. It is a conscious refusal to play the emotional game, whether intentional or unconscious, that someone else sets. When a woman withdraws, tests you with distance, or creates ambiguity, most men get pulled in. They ask, "What's wrong? What did I do? Do you still love me?" These seemingly harmless questions all scream one thing: I am affected by your behavior. And in that moment, power is lost. A Stoic understands that calm is not born from everything going smoothly. It's born from refusing to let anything, including someone else's emotions, disturb your inner state. Silence is the only way to protect that power. When we do not respond immediately, we create space, a pause, between stimulus and response. In that space, we can choose: is this worth my energy? Will responding now make me stronger, or am I just seeking relief? For the untrained mind, silence is the hardest discipline. It requires groundedness, self-trust, and the ability to tolerate uncertainty. When a woman tests you by withdrawing, and you stay silent, you are not just preserving your dignity. You're showing her, I cannot be manipulated easily. This doesn't mean you're cold or indifferent. It means you quietly assert, I choose balance over validation. A typical example, she says, I don't know if I feel the same anymore. Most men panic, question, or rush to prove their worth. But a Stoic man doesn't get pulled into that spiral. He reads it, reflects, and leaves it. Not because he's unfeeling, but because he understands. Fleeting emotions don't require immediate response. If it's real, it will return with clarity. If not, it will fold like a wave hitting the shore, unworthy of his inner stillness. Silence also forces others to confront their own emotions. When you react too quickly, you steal their opportunity to process. But when you stay quiet, No replies, no clarifications, no reassurances. You set an emotional standard. I do not engage in ambiguity. And if she wants to stay, she must enter your world, one governed by reason and clarity, not by emotional impulse. Make no mistake, maintaining this silence is uncomfortable. Your mind will rebel. Questions will flood you. Is she leaving? Does she still care? Am I losing her? But this is like standing still in a storm, not because you're unafraid, but because chasing it will only sweep you away. This is where training begins. Silence is a skill, and like all skills, it must be practiced daily. Every time you feel the urge to reply immediately, pause. Every time you want to justify your actions, pause. Every time you feel compelled to prove your worth, pause. That pause is the physical manifestation of mental strength. In the long run, silence creates a special kind of attraction, not one based on looks or wealth, but the strength of a man who cannot be moved, even by the one he loves. Women might not understand it immediately, but they will feel it. They'll sense a man who isn't needy, isn't desperate, isn't easily swayed, and they'll wonder, why doesn't he react? And that's when you begin to influence. In the end, reaction is the easiest thing. It comes from instinct and lack of training. Silence, applied at the right time in the right way, is a sign of inner maturity. It doesn't come from coldness, but discernment. You choose not to hand over your emotional power because you understand. The man who doesn't react hastily is the man who cannot be controlled. In relationships, especially between men and women, an unconscious need often emerges when emotions fade, the need to explain. When a woman grows distant, unclear, or cold, men feel compelled to save something. The most common way, justify. Say you still care, that you didn't mean to hurt her, that it's all a misunderstanding. But Stoicism teaches, in most cases, words don't change perception. Only consistent action does. Justification comes from fear of loss. When you feel your footing slip, anxiety pushes you to regain control. And speech is the easiest tool. Saying, I still love you. It's not what you think. Or, give me another chance, quickly fills the emotional void her distance creates. But to her, words mean little unless supported by action. Stoic thought sees integrity not in words, but in action. Quiet, steady behavior grounded in values speaks loudest. A man doesn't need to say he's strong if he rises early, trains daily, pursues his goals, and holds firm in adversity. He doesn't need to explain he's okay if his habits, tone, and presence all show he's grounded. Thus, he doesn't need to justify. He is the justification. Take a real example. A relationship in conflict. Most men write long messages, make calls, or plead. But if she senses imbalance, that he is adjusting based on her emotional signals, his words lose weight. Meanwhile, the man who doesn't explain but lives, aligned with his values, will cause her to pause and reflect. The alignment between action and values is the foundation of lasting attraction. If a man claims to value himself, but neglects his health, sacrifices time for someone who disrespects him, or changes principles to keep emotional peace, his words mean nothing. But if he's clear, consistent, keeps his word, and doesn't flinch under emotional pressure, his value is unmistakable. In Stoic teaching, every action reflects the mind. If you want to show you're steady, don't say it, master your reactions. If you want to show direction, don't write long plans, Act daily with purpose. Silence combined with deliberate action is the clearest message you can send, even to the woman you love. In truth, women don't judge men by their words, but by how they handle pressure. When emotions strain, when distance grows, when things get hard, words mean little unless backed by matching behavior. What makes a man stand out is not charm, but his steadiness without needing validation. Intentional action is not manipulation. It isn't done to impress or win someone back. If your motive is still to regain attention, you are not in control. For the Stoic, action flows from values, carried out regardless of recognition or response. If your principle is to wake early and train, heartbreak doesn't change your schedule. If you read and study each night for growth, one ignored message doesn't stop that. If you respect yourself, you don't enter conversations that cost your dignity just to feel less alone. This consistency changes how others see you, not because you force them, but because your presence transforms. When action reveals depth, others feel your strength, even in silence. And when that happens, there's nothing left to justify, because nothing remains to prove. In summary, words can be doubted, emotions shift, but consistent action reveals a man who has mastered himself. He doesn't explain. He doesn't beg. He doesn't fill silence with noise. He simply lives, with discipline, clarity, and resolve. And because of that, others respect him, not because they are convinced, but because they have no choice. 2. Lead without chasing. Build your own world. In many modern situations, especially in romantic relationships, there's a subtle force that causes many men to forfeit their position: the desire for validation. This longing doesn't just appear in small gestures, like waiting for a reply or a compliment. It seeps into their behavior, even shaping the way they define their own worth. But in Stoic philosophy, validation from others should never be the foundation for action. The ideal man acts not to be applauded, but to fulfill a mission he has chosen for himself. He doesn't wait to be seen, because he already sees himself. Mission is not a vague notion in Stoicism. It is a conscious and deliberate decision about who one chooses to become and how one chooses to live, regardless of outside eyes. When a man lives with mission, every action stems from a consistent value system, forged and reinforced daily. He doesn't alter course because others doubt him, nor does he abandon the path because a woman he cares about loses interest. He does not move for approval. He moves because this is the path he has chosen. In contrast, when a man's ultimate aim is validation, whether from women, society, or anyone, his behavior becomes conditioned by external feedback. Praise excites him. Silence unsettles him. Affection softens him. Withdrawal unravels him. In such a state, he loses self-governance, the very cornerstone of dignity in Stoic thought. He becomes reactive instead of proactive, a follower, not a leader. Acting from mission frees a man from the cycle of expectation and disappointment. When he trains daily, not to impress, but to build discipline. When he learns not to prove, but because wisdom is the path. When he works, creates, and builds, not for recognition, but as his contribution to the world, then every step he takes carries weight. Whether anyone is watching or not, he keeps walking. And that stability creates an allure no flattery can match. In love, the man on a mission isn't swayed by a woman's shifting moods. If she draws near, he values it. If she pulls away, he continues his rhythm. There is no collapse, no desperate clutching, no silent expectation that sacrifice will be rewarded. This consistency isn't coldness. It's the product of a soul trained not to depend on external affirmation. Stoicism teaches that anything beyond our control, including thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of others, is not worth our concern. A man with a mission understands this boundary. He does not try to change how others feel about him. He does not bend his path to be loved, praised, or kept. He simply asks, "Did I live today in accordance with the ideals I chose?" A leader isn't defined by how many follow. He's defined by his ability to walk alone, at the same pace. In silence, in invisibility, he continues his work, with no support, no companionship. He moves forward with faith. He draws others not through noise, but through the quiet force of presence, one that anyone who enters his orbit will feel. A man's strength doesn't lie in fleeting prominence, but in quiet consistency. Every early morning rise, every refusal to react, every moment of silence in place of argument, these forge inner resilience. Accumulated over time, they generate a magnetic field that commands both attention and respect. A woman encountering such a man will realize she is not the center of his life. Contrary to popular belief, this doesn't hurt her, it captivates her. She sees a man who isn't governed by emotion, who doesn't react impulsively, who doesn't shift himself for others. In a world full of chaos, this kind of man becomes an anchor, not through words, but through the way he lives. When a man acts from mission, everything he does transcends self-interest. He doesn't love to fill a void, but because love complements the man he's becoming. He doesn't seek validation to feel whole. He already is. He doesn't live to please, but to align with what he knows is right. And if someone walks beside him, it's a mutual choice, not the product of emotional conquest. In essence, a true leader doesn't need the gaze of others to know his value. He doesn't need to be seen to stay on course, because even in the dark, he knows where he's going and why he must go. His steadiness doesn't come from favorable conditions, but from choosing daily to act for mission, not for recognition. One of the most common mistakes men make in relationships is building their life around a woman's presence. They adjust their schedules, change habits, sacrifice personal joys, even compromise core values just to stay close. When she arrives, they expand their lives to welcome her. When she leaves, life becomes empty. But to the Stoic, this is a sign of an unstructured inner world, one that is unfinished, fragile, and easily invaded. Stoicism does not reject intimacy, but it centers on self-governance. In this light, your world is a metaphor for your personal domain, where you have full authority. Your mind, principles, goals, habits, values, rhythm, and ideals. When a man builds this world with clarity and strength, he is not easily swayed by emotions or behaviors of others. He doesn't live to serve someone else's mood. He lives to fulfill who he's meant to become. And when a woman enters that world, it is a choice, not a need, and never a rescue. Unlike the man who reacts to others' moods, the Stoic keeps clear boundaries between his inner world and the external. He is not shaken because she changes her tone, texts less often, or grows distant. He doesn't try to hold on at all costs, because that would mean placing her feelings above his direction. To him, the world is already built, with order, reason, and structure. Anyone who enters must respect it, not reshape it with emotion. When a woman steps into such a world, she senses stability from the start. There is no chaos, no guessing, no need to control or reshape him. She feels safe, not because he caters to her, but because she knows where she stands. Not the center, not the reason, but a welcomed presence, if she respects the structure in place. On the other hand, if a man builds his life like a flexible stopover, changing everything to please, she won't feel valued because it's all too easy, too soft, too undefined. In such a world, she doesn't step in to be led. She steps in to lead. And when the excitement fades, her exit carries no loss, for it was never a place she truly wished to stay. A personal world must be built on 3 pillars: values, discipline, and direction. Values are non-negotiables, like self-respect, honesty, and clear communication. Discipline is the power to repeat meaningful actions, regardless of mood. Rising early, training, reading, working with purpose. Direction is the ability to move forward without being pulled by temporary distractions. When all 3 are upheld, a man generates a powerful gravitational field, not by clinging to others, but by being the kind of person others don't want to leave. A man with his own world doesn't play emotional games. If a woman grows cold, he doesn't bombard her with messages. If she tests him with silence, he doesn't respond with anxiety or pleading. Instead, he returns to his daily rhythm, completes his workout, finishes his chapter, prepares for the week ahead. His life isn't disrupted by someone's changing mood, and that sends a clear message. This world has order. It is not for emotional chaos. Stability in this structure doesn't mean isolation. A Stoic man doesn't reject affection nor companionship, but he does not allow a relationship to become the center. If someone walks beside him, it's someone ready to share the path, not someone demanding to redirect it. And if someone chooses to leave, he doesn't stop to pull them back. His world keeps turning. No void, no crisis, no lost sense of direction. To achieve this, a man must set boundaries, both within and without. Internal boundaries mean refusing thoughts that diminish self-worth, like "I'm not enough" when rejected. External boundaries mean not accepting disrespect, not engaging in unclear dialogues, not allowing himself to be drawn into emotional games. When these boundaries are clear, the woman knows this is a world with rules. And if she can't respect them, there are no exceptions, not even for feelings. In summary, the Stoic man does not design his life as a resting place for wandering souls. He builds a world with ideals, principles, and a path where anyone invited must understand the value of being there, not because he needs them, but because he is whole enough to choose who walks beside him. And if no one stays, his world still moves forward, complete, unwavering, and self-contained. 3. Stop needing her. Focus on what you can control. In relationships between men and women, many mistakenly believe that constant care, affection, and emotional displays are the fastest road to a woman's heart. Many men, once they develop feelings, fall into instinctive submission. Frequent messaging, adjusting their schedules to fit hers, striving to please with romantic gestures or gifts, even compromising their core values just to remain in her favor. Yet such behaviors rarely create true attraction. More often, they erode a man's strength in her eyes. From both psychological and Stoic perspectives, attraction never arises from lack. Any action driven by a need to be loved, validated, or noticed carries the energy of dependency. And in relationships, dependency signals instability. When a man requires someone else's feelings to feel worthy, he becomes more of an emotional consumer than a builder of meaningful connection. This burdens the woman, kills spontaneity, and ultimately leads to disinterest. By contrast, a man who enters a relationship from a place of inner sufficiency brings no energy of grasping or needing. He doesn't approach a woman as a need to be fulfilled, but as a natural choice, a harmony between two complete worlds. He does not try to be loved. He lives in a lovable way. He doesn't seek approval. He simply acts in alignment with his values, and that very state, where being chosen is necessary, makes him stand out. Stoic philosophy teaches that all lasting attraction arises from inner strength, the ability to govern oneself, remain unmoved by externals, and avoid relying on others to fill emotional gaps. A fulfilled man isn't thrown off when responses don't meet his expectations. He doesn't check his phone constantly, doesn't wait for replies, doesn't allow distance to overtake his emotional balance. Instead, he keeps doing what is right, working, training, learning, and honoring his commitments, not to impress, but because that's who he is, regardless of who's watching. This is the critical difference between needy behavior and intentional behavior. The needy man reacts reflexively. When she pulls away, he clings. When rejected, he explains or begs. When he feels deprioritized, he's hurt. The intentional man observes, reflects, and remains grounded. He doesn't get swept up in her emotional tides because he is the shore, unmoved, unshaped, bypassing currents. Women are naturally drawn to stability, not financial or physical, but energetic. When a man enters the room grounded in posture, calm in his eyes, and unhurried in speech, that presence creates a deeper pull than any clever line. It says, "I am here, but I don't need your acceptance to exist. I am whole." And that absence of need becomes the source of attraction. In long-term relationships, inner fullness is key to durability. A man who needs love to feel good enough is easily shaken by small shifts. When she's inattentive, he doubts himself. When she's busy, he worries. When they disagree, he feels threatened. Over time, these reactions turn the relationship into an emotional battleground. But the fulfilled man doesn't expect perfection. He doesn't need her to feel worthy. And so, he can love without control, accompany without owning. That fullness also frees a man from the need to prove. He doesn't flaunt generosity, doesn't invest to receive affection, doesn't glitter for attention. His gestures, listening, caring, expressing affection, flow naturally, without expectation or invisible transactions. This helps the woman feel respected, not pressured to reciprocate under unspoken obligation. One of the clearest signs of inner sufficiency is the ability to walk away at the right time. He doesn't cling out of fear of losing her, because she is not his only source of completeness. He loves with maturity, accepts when alignment fades, and doesn't chase, lower his standards, or bow. And that decisiveness is proof of inner power, a strength no one can give and no one can take. Ultimately, in Stoic thought, lasting attraction doesn't stem from looks, wealth, or charm. It comes from something deeper, completeness of mind. When a man no longer seeks to be filled by others, he stops searching for validation and starts offering value. And when you become that kind of man, you don't need to chase, you are sought. Not because you need them, but because they need what you represent. One of Stoicism's central, but most difficult principles is the clear distinction between what we control and what we don't. Other people's thoughts, emotions, choices, and actions lie completely outside our command. The only domain we truly control is ourselves, our behavior, reactions, thinking, and way of living. When a man acts in response to another's feelings, especially a woman's, no matter how well-meaning, he's letting the external dictate his actions. In relationships, men are often tested by erratic shifts in the other's behavior. One day she is warm and affectionate. The next, she's distant. Sometimes she moves close, then pulls away. If these changes are not properly understood, a man is dragged into instability, where his behavior becomes entirely reactive to another's emotions. Stoicism offers a stark warning. When you let what's beyond your control govern your actions, you lose inner freedom. Freedom isn't about external choices. It's the ability to command yourself, no matter the circumstances. If you text, call to explain, rearrange plans, or tailor your words to manage another's reactions, you're led by emotion, not reason. And action based on emotion, to the Stoic, is a mark of weakness. That we can't control others is a given, but it's often misunderstood. Lack of control does not mean neglect. It means ending expectations and stopping the self-adjustment in hope that others will change. For instance, if a woman grows cold, you don't need to rush in with questions or reasons. Her distance, whatever its cause, is not yours to fix. Acting from fear of abandonment only reveals instability. But if you stay calm, act with discipline, and remain anchored in principle, you're operating from within your circle of control. This shows up most clearly in how we react. When others disappoint us, the reactive man gets angry, anxious, or desperate, trying to fix the situation by altering himself. The Stoic observes, accepts reality, and acts only when it aligns with his values, not to regain favor, but to remain consistent. A common sign of dependence on the uncontrollable is constant checking. He sends a message, then checks if it's been read. If unread, he's uneasy. If read without reply, he feels hurt. Each feeling stems from unmet expectation, an expectation aimed at someone beyond his command. His mind is strained by what he cannot govern, and that loss of control erodes his strength. To act truly from the locus of control, a man must return to three core questions. Is this within my power to influence? If not, am I acting out of fleeting emotion? If nothing can be changed, what's my best next step? Suppose a woman suddenly becomes distant. He might feel loss, but instead of chasing or adapting to regain attention, he must reflect. His point of control lies in his response, discipline, use of time, and mental composure. These small things become the foundation of inner stability. And that steadiness, not pleading or promises, is what creates lasting attraction. A man who refuses to let others' emotions dictate his behavior understands emotions fluctuate, but action must remain directional. Attraction flows from the ability to hold course even in uncertainty. When she pulls back, but he continues to perform, honor routines, and maintain his standards, he communicates without words. I am ruled by your feelings. And that quiet message, unspoken, draws others in, not because he tries, but because he doesn't waver. Stoicism is not coldness or detachment. It simply insists that action be guided by reason, not by the need to control others. When someone withdraws, the right response is not pursuit, It is stillness. If nothing can be done to change them, focus on what can be changed. Your thoughts, your speech, your behavior, your life. When a man lives this principle fully, outer chaos loses its power over his inner world. His actions become steady, clear, intentional, not reactive. He doesn't behave to get something from others, but to express who he already is. And from that position, a man living from within, he needs no control to have influence. In the end, anything outside your control, including others' emotions, actions, and decisions, should never guide your behavior. A Stoic man understands the line between self and other, between emotion and reason, between reaction and purpose. When you act only from what is within your command, you not only gain freedom, you become powerfully attractive, because nothing can pull you off the path you've chosen. 4. Frame control. Never negotiate your core values. In all human relationships, especially between men and women, there exists an invisible yet decisive structure, the frame, also known as one's personal value system. It's not just a set of life views. It's the foundation that shapes how a person acts, chooses, and responds to the world. The frame holds one's non-negotiable principles, convictions that are maintained even in the face of disagreement, difficulty, or the risk of losing a relationship. According to Stoic thought, true stability begins when one understands what is within his control and what is not. The frame is the clearest manifestation of inner control. When circumstances shift, others react unpredictably, or emotions are challenged, the frame keeps a man grounded. A man without a frame is easily swayed by emotion, quickly alters his behavior to please, and lives reactively rather than intentionally. This becomes especially evident in romantic relationships. Many men, once drawn to a woman, gradually abandon their frame in the effort to maintain the connection. They change how they speak to fit in, give up personal habits to share more, alter life plans to grow together, and even agree to things they don't believe in, for fear that otherwise they'll be left behind. Yet from a behavioral psychology perspective, such actions actually diminish their attractiveness. Because when you reshape yourself to please, you're no longer at the center of your world. You've shifted into someone else's orbit. Women may not always say it, but they're highly attuned to such subtle shifts. A man who was once clear, firm, and strong begins to emit a different signal when he compromises to appease, the signal of instability. And when a woman senses a man has lost his center, she loses the feeling of being led. Naturally, people follow those with clear direction. But if a man starts adjusting himself based on her emotions, his leadership in the relationship begins to falter. In reality, a man's frame might consist of very basic commitments: respecting personal time, refusing disrespect in communication, never compromising on core values, prioritizing personal growth, and never allowing fleeting emotion to dictate major decisions. When this frame is solid, the man reacts consistently. Whether faced with criticism, silence, or emotional volatility, he doesn't rush to apologize when he's not wrong. He doesn't concede just to keep the peace. He doesn't go quiet when silence would betray his truth. Everything he does stems from values, not momentary feelings. Refusing to change for approval doesn't mean rigidity or lack of flexibility. It simply means refusing to negotiate the essential. Stoicism makes a clear distinction between what should be adapted for growth and what must be protected at all costs, even when misunderstood or rejected. When a man abandons his frame to keep someone from leaving, he's no longer himself. And even if she stays, the relationship loses its balance, because one party has already retreated from his foundation. Holding the frame is also how others learn what respectful behavior looks like. When a man remains consistent with his values, a woman quickly learns what boundaries are negotiable and what are not. If you change just because she's displeased, you teach her that emotions can control your behavior. But if you remain firm, without aggression or domination, you establish a code of respect that while you're willing to love, you're not willing to trade your self-respect. Core values are not what you say, they're what you live. If you believe mornings are for meditation and training, you don't skip them just because she wants you to stay in bed longer. If you believe silence in the face of insult is the wrong compromise, you speak clearly, even if it creates tension. If you refuse to live aimlessly, you won't commit to someone without goals. Not because you're judgmental, but because you understand that coexisting requires aligned principles. In every scenario, holding your frame leads to two outcomes. Either she respects you and adjusts to walk beside you, or she leaves because she can't bend you. Both are welcome, because both preserve your integrity. Most importantly, you avoid falling into self-doubt, a dangerous spiral that happens when a man changes too much and no longer recognizes himself. In short, the frame, a man's living value system, is non-negotiable. It's not designed to impress, but to guide a principled, weight-bearing life. A man who holds his frame doesn't chase emotions, doesn't act to meet expectations, and doesn't bend just to be loved. Because love without respect for one's core values cannot last, and a man who doesn't hold firm cannot be a pillar in any relationship. A man's true appeal doesn't come from impressing others or manipulating their feelings. It comes from his ability to remain internally consistent, especially when circumstances are uncertain, challenging, or emotionally intense. In Stoic thought, the most magnetic man is the one with a frame so clear he doesn't need to state it or prove it through showy behavior. His silent firmness says everything. I know who I am, and I don't need your confirmation to be it. A frame isn't just a spoken philosophy or idealized code. It's a real structure, seen in how a man manages his time, chooses his company, responds to conflict, maintains his habits, and above all, how he engages in close relationships. When a man has a solid frame, he doesn't get pulled into another's emotions. He doesn't act just to smooth the moment or to avoid losing someone. He acts from a firm center, where every decision is weighed against values, not passing moods. This is most clearly seen in how a man responds to emotional tests. When a woman is displeased, upset, or creates distance, many men instinctively try to regain control. They justify, explain, change plans, or do something to restore emotional balance. But to the Stoic, this is a symptom of weak internal structure, of being governed by the uncontrollable. A man with a clear frame does not play emotional games. He doesn't dismiss her feelings, but neither does he adjust himself just to avoid discomfort. Consistency in how you live generates a unique energy, one that cannot be manipulated. A woman sensing this quickly understands the boundaries, not a cold wall, but a clear line of dignity and strength. She can't influence him with silence. She can't alter his behavior with mood swings. And this doesn't push her away. It makes her feel safe. Because in a chaotic world, meeting someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't rush to react, is rare and reassuring. Not needing control means not needing to manage another's emotions to feel worthy. A man doesn't try to make her happy to feel right about himself. If she's sad, he listens. If she's angry, he gives space. But he doesn't reshape himself to appease. He responds appropriately, but never sacrifices principle. The difference lies in motive. The man who fears loss will give everything away. The man who lives by his frame keeps everything, including his dignity. Not needing to justify is another sign of stability. A man doesn't feel compelled to explain every action. He isn't shaken by being misunderstood. He doesn't scramble to fix others' judgments, because he doesn't live to please, nor build an image to be liked. Every decision is made with thought and inner conviction. If someone disagrees, he remains calm. If someone leaves, he remains on course. To the Stoic, silence and consistency are the strongest proof of character. Not sharp words or controlling actions, but the steady hand that stays the course, no matter how the wind blows. When a man upholds healthy habits, remains composed, and says no to what violates his values, regardless of pressure, he sends a powerful, wordless signal: I cannot be moved. This is the energy that attracts, an energy that makes others adjust to fit your world, instead of you adjusting to fit their emotions. A woman may test you, retreat, or express anger, but if you don't flinch, don't retreat, and don't abandon your frame, she'll realize that staying in your world requires her to respect the structure. That realization makes you different. A man with a clear frame fears losing no one, because he holds on to no one. He doesn't control, because he doesn't need to possess. He walks with those who can live in harmony with the values he has set, not through persuasion, tactics, or emotional leverage, but through the sheer force of being someone who truly knows himself. In the end, the man with a clear frame is not attractive because he tries. He's attractive because he doesn't. Every behavior, every decision, every response reflects a stable inner map. He doesn't need to manage others to feel valuable. He doesn't need to justify to be accepted. He only needs to live true. And in time, that consistency creates a power that nothing can replace. We don't need to abandon the modern world to live like ancient Stoic philosophers. What I've learned from practicing this philosophy is simple. Meaningful change doesn't come from grand, explosive moments. It comes from choosing rightly in the smallest ones. When a woman grows distant, instead of reacting impulsively, I choose silence, take a deep breath, and return to my rhythm. Reading, exercising, quietly writing down unfinished thoughts. In those seemingly still moments, I feel my inner strength grow. We can't control the emotions, words, or behavior of others, but we can always control how we respond. Whenever I feel the urge to explain, to chase, or to clarify, I ask myself, does this serve my core values? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. Holding the frame, my non-negotiable principles, frees me from insecurity. It allows me to act from fullness, not from lack. Here's what I've come to realize. When you stop acting to be accepted and start acting because it's right, you don't just become free, you become profoundly attractive. And that is the greatest gift Stoicism offers. A return to yourself, whole, grounded, and unshakable. If you found value in this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. And wherever you are on your path, always remember, true strength isn't in controlling others, it's in no longer needing to. See you in the next video.